Welcome to this AgriData Inc. tutorial video. In this video, we're going to be discussing and using the Topography and Hillshade features within the Surety and Surety Pro customized online mapping software. Topography information allows us to see elevation data on the map itself. Within Surety and Surety Pro, we take this elevation data and we do a couple different things with it. We can display a heat map type layer called the Topography Hillshade that will allow us to easily see elevation changes. We can see the contour topo lines on the map. This is complete with elevation numbers. And we create a layer simply called Hillshade that enhances the FSA photos within the system. Today we'll be covering a number of topography layers in the system. This includes the contour topo lines layer, the Topography Hillshade layer, the USGS topo map, the Hillshade layer, as well as the NDVI Hillshade layer. As far as the topography maps we're covering, this includes the topography contour map, the topography hillshade map, the topography map, the NDVI hillshade map, and the ability to add contours to any other map in the system. To begin, let's take a look at some of the different layers that we can apply to the map itself. To demonstrate this, let's go ahead and use our zoom tool. Zoom down to an area of interest that we're looking at potentially mapping. I have some saved boundaries here. So to view the elevation changes in this land, we can use the layers available within the Surety and Surety Pro system. To access those layers, we're going to click on the Layers button in the right-hand panel. Within this Layers button, go down a little bit. The first topography layer is going to be our contour topo lines. If we enable this layer, we're able to see the contour lines, which is the lines that indicate the change in elevation on the map itself. The number of lines and the interval between the lines, or the number of feet between one line and another line, can vary depending on your map extent. This can all be adjusted within our layer properties for this contour topo line layer. To change this, we can click on contour topo lines. It'll tell us our current scale. So right now we are sitting at a scale of 7,042. And that scale is indicating the map zoom level. We can compare this number, this 7,042, to where we're sitting at in our scale grid here, where it looks like we fall into the third category here. So we can actually adjust this. We can adjust the range of the minimum and maximum scale, and then we can adjust the interval that we want the contour lines to display at in feet. Basically, what this means is there's 3 feet between each contour line on the map. We can adjust this to something like 5 if we want, and if we update this, there are fewer lines, which correlates with the larger interval number. We can also see this by looking at the numbers. So 1360 compared to 1355 as the next line indicates that there's a 5-foot interval. You can always get back to the default settings here by clicking on default, but you can set up and customize this based on your current scale or the scale that you would like to see them at. The next layer that we'll take a look at is the Topography Hillshade layer. I'm going to turn off the contour topo line layer and enable the Topography Hillshade layer. This layer assigns colors to the elevation differences, and it's all based on your current map view as well. The lower elevations will have a dark blue color, whereas the higher elevations will run through a lighter blue, a yellow, orange, red, and then to the white color, indicating the highest elevation within your map view. Your map view will always contain the same number of colors. The colors will always be dynamic based on your current view, meaning that there'll never be an instance that you'll only have one color for the entirety of your map. Similar to the contour topo lines layer, we can adjust the way the Topography Hillshade layer works. So again, within your layers panel, let's go ahead and click on Topography Hillshade. The first setting here is to change the opacity of this topography layer. This means we can tell this layer to become more see-through or less see-through. So for example, if we go to 100%, it'll only display the colors and not the hill shading, which is the lighter and darker areas of each color. Whereas if we change it to something like 20, it goes the opposite way, where it will display more of the hill shading, kind of lighter and darker shading, and not so much of the colors themselves. We can also adjust the exaggeration of that hill shading. If we go down to 10 and update that, there's going to be less of a difference between the darker and lighter hill shading colors. We recommend to play around with these numbers to find something that fits your needs. You can also vary location to location depending on the difference in elevation within one map view. Again, we can either save this or set it back to default. Many times it's desired to apply both the contour topo lines and the topography hillshade layers on at the same time, and this can give an easy to read map of the elevation differences. A third layer that we can use is the underlying imagery can be changed to use the old USGS topography maps. So if we go down again in our layers, if we go down to the orthophoto section, we can change the orthophoto to be the topo map. This again will change the underlying map to be the old USGS format. These lines are not able to be modified. They are static no matter where you go. If we set this back to our recent FSA photo, we can also take a look at the hillshade layer. The hillshade layer is a layer derived from that elevation data and applies a shading to one side of the hill. So we get this variety of lights and darks that can help emphasize the different elevation changes within a map. Similar again to the contour topo lines layer and the topography hillshade layer, this hillshade can be adjusted. So if we click on the link next to the checkbox, we can adjust how much that orthophoto underneath shows through. So if you want more hill shading than the actual imagery underneath, you can set this to a lower value. And then the exaggeration of that hill shade itself. So the lights are lighter, the darks are darker, the higher you go, and just the opposite, the lower you go. Again, you can play around with the numbers to get it to a point where you are satisfied, or again, set to default. The default value doesn't really align with what I want to see, so I'm going to come back in here and adjust it so that I can see more of the orthophoto and less of just the hill shading. I'm going to go ahead and save that. The last data layer that uses the elevation data is going to be the NDVI hillshade layer. So let's go ahead and turn off our normal hillshade and enable the maximum NDVI with the hillshade. So what this gives us is that NDVI information overlay alongside the hillshade overlay to help better understand the high and low NDVI values and potentially correlate them with elevation change. The hillshade emphasis can again be adjusted by going to the layer itself, clicking on it, and then adjusting the opacity of the NDVI or the green and red layer, as well as the vertical exaggeration or the lights and darks of the hillshade itself. Now that we know about the layers of topography information themselves, we can explore what types of maps we can generate using this information to create a professional and informative map. Let's go ahead and turn off our NDVI and hillshade. So for this example, let's move over to another field here. The first map type we're going to be looking at is going to be the topography contours map. For this, I like to kind of zoom in to a little closer area. Obviously, it's very much preference oriented. But let's go ahead and select the boundaries that we're looking to map out and find the topography contours link in your right-hand panel. The topography contours map is a generic map that shows our boundary lines. It shows the map view that we had previously seen on our other tab. It also includes our contour interval lines. So the contour interval lines can be adjusted over in the right side here. So we can adjust this up or down as needed. The topography contour map also contains some more information, such as your source of topography information, our intervals, the minimum maximum elevations, the range of elevation, average elevation, and our standard deviation. Similar to the other maps in the system, you can click in the top title and add your own text to the title. Also, like the other forms and maps in the system, we have the map options that allows us to change everything from our text size of our labels to the color and outline of those labels, the border outline of the boundary itself. If you are in Surety Pro, it allows you to label the farm name and field ID on the map if you're selecting a saved border, as well as turning on and off the acreage. Our remove selection layer in this case doesn't have any effect, but if we're selecting from a custom layer, you can remove the styling by using this option. And then our limit sections to township is going to basically turn off any section numbers outside of the current township that we're in. The other options are to view or email PDF of this map, to save a PDF to your device or computer, save a JPEG image file. You can print, close the map. We can edit the field boundaries. In Surety Pro, we can send this map to the Dossier Studio. We can export the boundaries and or the imagery using the export button. And again, adjust the contours using the contour interval adjustment. The next map we'll go over is our Topography Hillshade map. This map is similar to the topography contours, except in the fact that it applies a color coding to the elevation changes. And so we can see the low to high range matching the appropriate colors in the bottom corner here. Again, we can adjust the contours to be appropriate for our project or situation. And it contains all the same information as the other map that we just went over. Our third map is the topography map. This is the original map that we had in the system, and it contains the USGS paper map overlay. So it'll give you the contours and some other information right within this map. One note, by default, if you have within your map options the default settings, then the boundary color will automatically change to a black color. If your boundary color is not black, then that means you've changed your map options. And so you'd have to go in and adjust those to get the appropriate color or get a color that contrasts with the background. The final map that we'll be going over is called the NDVI Hillshade. Let's first use the select tool and let's select our boundary again here. The NDVI Hillshade can be found by clicking on the NDVI link within the Maps and Reports panel. And then NDVI Hillshade should be the top option. The NDVI Hillshade map will display the maximum NDVI data for the current crop year that's selected, or just the current year. It will then overlay that data on the map and then overlay on top of that the contour line information as well as the hill shading. This can help determine whether or not a low or high NDVI value corresponds with change in elevation. A couple things to note on this report is you can select different years. When you select a previous year, that data will be displayed then on the map itself, as well as bring in the crop types for that year. You can also change the contour interval, similar to the other maps. And of course, you have all the same options, such as exporting, saving, printing, from the buttons in the right-hand side of the map. This concludes this AgriData Inc. tutorial video on the topography information within Surety and Surety Pro. For more resources, use the Help drop-down and go to Support Documentation to view our wiki page. You can also keep on top of all the updates we do using the Updates button. We'll give you a list of all the updates in recent months.